Hey guys, this is Tirelis here with another Warlords of Draenor beta video. In this video I'm going to be looking at Arms Warriors, the class changes to Arms Warriors, spec changes I should say. This is going to be another long video because there are so many changes to Arms Warriors, even more so than Protection Warriors. So I'm going to go through it as quickly as possible, but there's a lot of material to go through. So we're going to look at the major changes to Arms Warriors, their changed abilities and removed abilities, their new and changed glyphs, their new Draenor perks, and then their changed and brand new talents. The first major change to Arms Warriors is the fact that they literally got gutted. They lost Overpower, they lost Heroic Strike, they lost Slam. At one point, the only two abilities you could use on an Arms Warrior was Mortal Strike and Colossus Smash, and I found myself just sitting there doing nothing. And Blizzard finally changed some things to actually make it better. So Arms Warriors really got gutted. The second change to Arms is their change to their mastery. Strikes of Opportunity was another multi-strike mastery, and since there's a multi-strike stat in game now, there's no reason to have those multi-strike masteries. So Strikes of Opportunity was removed, and instead there is now Mastery Weapons Master, which increases the damage of Colossus Smash, Mortal Strike, and Execute by 20%, and that'll increase with Mastery. So it's not exactly the most exciting mastery, but at least you're not doubling up with multi-strike, etc. Haste was a stat that was not very viable for Warriors as a whole, so Blizzard wanted to change that, and they brought in the new passive known as Headlong Rush, and Headlong Rush its haste will now reduce the global cooldown, it will reduce the cooldown of Shield Slam, Thunderclap, and Mortal Strike. So that's a nice change to make haste more valuable for Arms Warriors. Warrior stances are back in the game. This is actually something really cool. I liked, the whole going back and forth between stances depending on the situation. This is more of a PvP thing, but it can be used in PvE. Your defensive stance is a 25% reduction in damage. So now there will be abilities that you can only use in defensive stance. There will be abilities that you can only use in battle stance. I can charge in here and use defensive stance, and it'll switch over, and I'll have different abilities. As you notice down here, I've got Devastate, Revenge, and Shield Barrier. They have all been added to Arms so that you can use them in defensive stance, which is awesome, especially with something like Shield Barrier, which means that defensive stance is there for you to try and mitigate damage when you are being focused in a PvP setting, or maybe you made a mistake and you find yourself in a sticky situation in a raid instance. So that is why the change is there, and you have those shifting back and forth between stances. Honestly, I think it's really cool, and people will like it. There have been a couple of new abilities added to Warriors. The first is Inspiring Presence, which I believe this is the only class that grants this, which is going to make it very valuable. It grants 3% versatility to the warrior and all allies within 100 yards. That is a huge deal. Versatility is a new stat that basically buffs everything, and if warriors are the only class that are going to have this buff, that basically is going to make them at least everyone to want to have at least one warrior in the raid. So I will show you the buff right here in the spell book. Here it is, Inspiring Presence. So that is a really nice buff. I believe it was to just give more raid utility to warriors. Another added ability is Rend, and you're like, well, Rend's already in the game. No, the old Rend is back. The Rend where you actually had to click a button and it applied the bleed to the target. That has been put back into the game. Warriors, to be honest, feel more like the beginning of Cataclysm and Wrath of the Lich King. That's when I started my warrior, and that's how I remember warriors, and it just feels more like that now that we have Rend back, etc. And there have been, some changes to the stances and so forth. So I really like the way warriors are. Yes, they got gutted, but I think they're in a great shape at the moment. There are several changed abilities that have happened to warriors. Know that shouts no longer generate rage, but they now last an hour. So we've gone from like 2 minutes to 5 minutes to now an hour cooldown on shouts. And that is honestly, it's just a buff thing. It's more raid utility, I guess you could say, for warriors, but they had it before, so it's more of a convenience thing for warriors, which is really nice. Battle stance has been changed a little bit. It now increases your rage regeneration is increased by 100% from auto attacks, and critical strikes generate double rage. This is to provide that difference between battle stance and defensive stance. They don't want warriors just sticking in defensive stance because you get that 25% reduction. No, they changed it, so now battle stance, you are going to want to be in battle stance if you want to generate any rage. So that is a huge change to battle stance. Charge now roots instead of stunning a target. If I charge up here, you can see the rocks form. That is the new root that has been added to the game. Blizzard's been cracking down on stuns for a long time, and so that is one of the new, I guess, casualties to the removal of stuns in the game. Execute has been changed a little bit. Execute, currently on live, did the 30 rage, and it was just 30 rage and that was it. Now it's back to the way it used to be, or at least the way I remember on warriors, and the fact that for arms warriors it costs 10 rage and it can consume up to an additional 40% rage to do additional damage. So that kind of dynamic has been put back in the game, and I think it'll be really interesting. And when you start to think about the way execute has changed and so forth, your rotation, and the fact that Ren's back, your rotation, has kind of really been changed as an arms warrior, and honestly, it's kind of, in my opinion, kind of gone back in time. I really like the way things have changed. Hamstring now actually does damage to the enemy, so that is a small change to hamstring. It's not just a snare on the enemy. It actually does damage. It's very little. Heroic throw now has a minimum range of 8 yards, so you cannot heroic throw someone from 2 inches away. I agree with this change. Like, why wouldn't it be that way? Intervene is actually pretty cool. There's a wording change on it, in that it used to say allies and party members are the only things you can intervene. Well, that's not the case anymore. I can now intervene anybody. I do not have to be in a party with them. As you can see, I just intervened a healing dummy here. So that is a cool change that has been brought to intervene. You do now have to stick within 10% 10 yards of the target to receive that damage reduction instead of 25 yards. So you have to stay closer, but the fact that you can now intervene anybody, I think, is a great change to the ability. Taunt now requires defensive stance, which is kind of going in line with the fact that, defensive stance only has certain abilities and battle stance will only have certain abilities. So that's a good change. Mortal Strike now only costs 20 rage. Sweeping Strike now costs 10 rage, down from 30. And Whirlwind has also seen a reduction in rage down to 20 from 30. So just quick across the board, rage reductions on abilities that are used for arms warriors. The last changed ability is a PvP change, and that is Intimidating Shout now has a 6-second duration in PvP, down from 8 seconds, and that goes in line with Blizzard's across the board reduction of CC and how long CC lasts in Warlords of Draenor. So that is not too much new, but that is something that has been done across the board, so I wouldn't worry about it too much. Now, abilities that have been removed from Warrior. Overpower, as I mentioned before, has been removed. Unbridled Wrath, which was whenever you stuck by a stun or immobilizing effect, you generate rage over 10 seconds. That has been removed. Berserker Stance has been removed from the game. I guess Blizzard just really didn't like... I didn't get a clear explanation as to why. Blizzard just really didn't like where it was, and so Berserker Stance has been removed from the game. Cleave has been removed from the game. You're going to have to find new ways to do cleaves, and Warriors are really going to have to use Sweeping Strikes a lot. That's most likely the reason for the drastic, reduction in rage cost for Sweeping Strikes, is to make up for the fact that you no longer have a cleave in the game. Demoralizing Banner and Skull Banner have both been removed from the game. It's Blizzard's, reduction of, button bloat, and so they removed both of those banners. Also, Disarm has been removed. This is something you really should not worry about, because disarms, to be honest, everyone lost their disarm. so I wouldn't really worry about disarms. Rogues lost dismantle, Windwalkers lost their disarm, so everyone's lost their disarm. Some spec-specific changes. Shield Wall has been removed. It is now protection only. Deep Wounds has been removed. It is now protection only. And Mocking Banner has now been removed, and it is protection only. So those abilities, across the board have been removed for Arms Warriors, and you will not see them anymore. That brings us to the new and changed glyphs for Warlords of Draenor. The first of these glyphs, let's go ahead and pull them up, is going to be Glyph of Heroic Leap, which increases your speed by 70% for 3 seconds after using Heroic Leap. Notice it says exclusive Glyph of Death from Above, and that's this one up here, which is the cooldown on Heroic Leap. And that basically means that you can only have one of those active at a time. You cannot have both of them active at the same time. The next change is Glyph of Rallying Cry. Notice it says Glyph of Mocking Banner in here. You do not have Mocking Banner anymore. They just have not removed it from the game. Or they have not removed it from Arms and Fury yet. The next one is Glyph of Rallying Cry, which while your Rallying Cry is active, you also gain 20% Leech, healing you for 20% of all damage and healing you cause. So that's a nice change to Rallying Cry there. It'll help you through your health, regeneration. Another change has been Shattering Throw. Shattering Throw has been removed as an ability unless you actually glyph into it. So it no longer has the, I believe it was a Sunder type effect. That has been removed. All Sunder-esque abilities have been removed from the game, so weakened blows, etc., those have all been removed from the game. So Shattering Throw is here for you to grab as a glyph if your arms are Fury, so that you can remove those invulnerabilities. That is something I love doing, especially to those paladins who bubble all the time. There is Glyph of Flawless Defense, which you have a 25% reduced chance for attacks against you to be critical strikes while Die by the Sword is active. Nice glyph there. I personally have, it's been a while since I played Warrior, so I'm not quite sure, how often or in what situations Die by the Sword is used, but I believe that'll be a nice glyph that has been brought to the game. There have been changed glyphs. There is Glyph of Blitz, which your charge now roots an additional 2 nearby targets. Before, I believe it was stun, so they changed it so that, it goes in line with the fact that you're now rooting. There is improved Die by the Sword, which, while Die by the Sword is active, using Wild Strike increases duration by 1 second per use. It originally had Overpower added to that. It has been removed. It's still stated as Arms Fury, so they're going to add an Arms ability to it. Most likely, probably Mortal Strike will be added to that. But that's something that we will have to see. They could possibly just make it a Fury only, but at the moment, it's still stated to be Arms and Fury. There is Glyph of Wind and Thunder, and that is down here. And that is, it increases the radius of your Whirlwind and Thunderclap now by 4 yards. So a small little change there. That brings us to the new Draenor perks for Arms Warriors, and to be honest, their Draenor perks are terrible. I'm sorry, but they just really didn't give you anything interesting. There's Enhanced Rend, which each of your auto attacks causes 3,600 additional physical damage from your Rend on the target. That wording is really confused to me, but what I believe it ends up being too is just a damage boost for Rend. Nothing special. There's Enhanced Sweeping Strikes, which Sweeping Strikes now last 5 seconds longer, so that's somewhat interesting. Improved Die by the Sword, increases damage reduction by Die by the Sword by 10%. And then lastly, there is Improved Heroic Leap, which increases the radius of Heroic Leap. The damage radius of Heroic Leap is increased by 2 yards. So that is a nice, small little change there. Honestly, their Draenor perks are not that great. There's only 4 because it's done every 2 levels, so at 92, 94, 96, 98, you'll be getting a new Draenor perk. Otherwise, I kind of wish they'd come up with something better, but they didn't. So that brings us to the final changes to the class, which are in the talent tree. So we're going to take a look at the talents. First change, you should look at Warbringer. It says your charge now stuns target for 1.5 seconds instead of rooting it. It used to be, I believe, a 3-second stun. So it used to increase your stun. Now it only just, actually does a stun. So that's, if you still want your stun, you can grab Warbringer. This is a huge nerf, I believe, to ARBS warriors and, well, all warriors in general, is second wind, and is whenever you're below 35% health, you no longer gain that flat health increase, that 3% health per second. You now gain 10% leech, healing yourself for a percentage of the damage. So you're not going to be able to do, when things get dicey, just start kiting and running and, honestly being a wuss. You actually are going to have to, get in there, deal some damage, some quick damage with leech to try and get your health back up. The 45 tier has been completely blown up. All of the shouts that were in there, disrupting shout, piercing shout, etc., have all been removed from the game, and they have instead added these 3 new talents. So there's Taste of Blood, which is each time Ren deals damage, you gain 3 rage. To be honest, really boring. Sudden Death, same ability, changed. Well, I should say same name that has been changed. Each of your auto attacks has a 10% chance to make your next execute cost no initial rage, consume no extra rage, and usable on any target regardless of health level. So this actually adds a little bit more depth to the arms rotation if you grab this. I think it's definitely something interesting that people should look at. There is Slam. I've personally been taking Slam. I really like it. So Slam you can get back as a talent, and you slam an opponent causing 15,000 physical damage. Each consecutive use of Slam increases the damage dealt by 50% and the rage cost by 100%, stacking up to 2 times. So it does start to get really expensive, but it's a nice filler to have if you don't, want to just sit there and wait for rage and so forth, or you wait for sudden death procs or taste for blood. So I definitely, one of these 2 talents I think are definitely the best options. Taste for blood I'm not really liking very much. So 45 tier, completely revamped. It really fills in the gaps for all the gutting that ARMS received and Fury received. 60, notice that Stormbolt is now on the 60 tier as opposed to the 90 tier. That was basically just a shift back and forth between the 2. Mass Spell Reflection has been changed so that it actually replaces Spell Reflection, and its cooldown has been reduced from 1 minute down to 30 seconds. So I think personally a kind of buff there, having a short 30-second cooldown on a Mass Spell Reflection. So that's kind of nice. Bladestorm, as we mentioned, has now been removed to moved to this 90 tier now, and that leaves us with the level 100 talents. The level 100 talents, the first of these is Anger Management, which is a passive, and it is every 30 rage that you spend reduces the remaining cooldown of several abilities by 1 second, and those abilities are Avatar, Bloodbath, Bladestorm, Stormbolt, Shockwave, Dragon Roar, Mocking Banner, Heroic Leap, Recklessness, and Die by the Sword. So I honestly don't know how popular this will be, but it's definitely something to look at. Over here on the right hand side we have Ignite Weapons, which ignites your weapons and deals 95% weapon damage, 133 if a one-handed weapon is equipped, as fire, and causing your auto attacks to deal fire damage for 10 seconds. This ability is not on the global cooldown. This costs rage and whatnot, but I think it's a pretty cool ability to have. So we'll go ahead and try it here so you can see what it looks like. So I'm going to go ahead and use it here. You can see now my hammer is now on fire for these 10 seconds, and then I have to reapply it. Definitely something pretty cool there. I like it. It's cool. I don't know how much I like it for an arms warrior. I think this next talent is better, but it's definitely an option there if you want to go for it. The next talent here is Ravager, and Ravager is like a targeted blade storm. Ravager, throw a whirling axe at the target location and inflict 6,000 damage to enemies within 6 yards every 1 second, lasts 10 seconds. Also increases your chance to parry by 30% for 10 seconds. That was added in for the prot stance. Um, Honestly, I think this is it's pretty cool. Know that if we'll go ahead and show you the visual right here. You can see that's a really cool visual right there, and that's a lot of damage it's dishing out. You should note that because of the graphics changes that they made in Warlords of Draenor, other classes won't necessarily see that animation. They pretty much will only see a weapon flying around. So that's not necessarily it's not like Solar Beam where it's just going to pop up and be a beacon and everyone's going to run out of it. There are going to be plenty of people who don't notice it, and you're going to be able to get some damage off in PvP. So I wouldn't underestimate taking that for PvP. Otherwise, those are the level 100 talents for Arms Warrior. That is everything dealing with Arms Warriors. I actually really like where Arms Warriors is headed in Warlords of Draenor. It kind of feels, it's going back to the earlier days of how Arms Warriors worked in the, at least how I remember when I played my Arms Warrior a lot back in Cataclysm. It feels more like that. There's more stance dancing, I guess you could say. There's more uses for the defensive stance. You're not going to be sticking to defensive stance. There's actually meaningful reason to go into battle stance. So I think there's a lot of great changes that are coming to Arms Warriors. They look in really great shape. Right now their damage is kind of absurd. So if you see some nerfs on future patch notes for beta, just know that they are way ahead of the pack of everyone else, and so they're just bringing them in line with everyone else. But otherwise, I think the play style for Arms Warrior is in fantastic shape, and I probably will be looking into possibly maining mine or playing mine at least a decent amount in Warlords of Draenor. So I hope you enjoyed this video. The next video that I will look at is Fury Warriors. I will see you guys later. Tirelis out.